In 2022, one country's decision to flip a switch plunged an entire continent into energy chaos. Europe had spent 30 years building the most sophisticated, interconnected energy grid on the planet. Decades of diplomacy, trillions of dollars, and it all came down to a single pipeline. That's not a design flaw, that's a weapon. Here's what most people get wrong about energy. They think it's an economic story: supply, demand, prices at the pump. But energy has never been just economics. It's power, political power, the kind that can make or break governments. And right now, we are in the middle of the most consequential energy reshuffling since the 1970s oil crisis. Except this time, there are new players, new fuels, and new weapons. The question isn't who controls the oil anymore. The question is, who controls the grid of the future? To understand today, you have to go back 50 years. In 1973, OPEC nations cut off oil supply to the West. Overnight, the United States, the most powerful country on Earth, was brought to its knees. Lines stretched for miles. Factories shut down. The economy cratered. That moment created an obsession that still drives foreign policy today. Never be dependent on an enemy for your energy. But Europe learned the wrong lesson, or maybe the convenient one. Through the Cold War and beyond, European nations quietly built themselves into an addiction. Russian natural gas. It was cheap, it was reliable, and it let politicians promise growth, low heating bills, and a comfortable peace with Moscow. By 2021, Russia supplied nearly 40% of Europe's gas. Some countries were closer to 60%. Germany even built 2 dedicated pipelines directly from Russia, bypassing every other country. They called it pragmatic economics. Critics called it something else entirely. Then, in February 2022, Putin invaded Ukraine, and suddenly, the bill came due. Here's where it gets interesting and complicated. Russia didn't just cut off gas overnight. It squeezed a slow, methodical reduction in supply through mid-2022. Enough to spike prices. Enough to force Europe to panic buy from global markets at record costs. It was economic warfare dressed as supply chain management. And who stepped in? America. U.S. liquefied natural gas exports to Europe exploded, tripling almost overnight. The U.S. became Europe's emergency energy dealer. Europe paid the price. U.S. energy companies made historic profits. That's not a conspiracy. That's just incentives. Now here's the paradox nobody wants to admit. The rush to renewables isn't just about climate change anymore. It's about energy independence. The sun doesn't negotiate. The wind doesn't run pipelines through hostile territory. When Germany accelerates its solar build-out, it isn't just reducing carbon. It's reducing leverage that Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar hold over its foreign policy. This is why America's Inflation Reduction Act was one of the most geopolitically significant pieces of legislation in decades. $370 billion in clean energy subsidies wasn't just climate policy. It was a declaration that America intends to own the next energy era. Except there's a problem. China manufactures roughly 80% of the world's solar panels and controls the mining and processing of most of the critical minerals needed to build batteries, wind turbines, and electric vehicles. Which brings us to the part of this story that almost nobody is talking about. Oil made the Middle East powerful. Critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, are the oil of the new economy, and the scramble for them is already underway. China has spent 2 decades quietly locking up mining rights across Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia. The US, Europe, and Australia are now racing to catch up. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, which holds over 70% of the world's cobalt, mining communities still lack electricity. The brutal irony of the green transition, the people sitting on top of it are benefiting the least. This isn't abstract. This is hitting real people right now. When energy prices spiked in 2022, global food prices followed because fertilizer is made from natural gas. Poorer nations, already fragile, were pushed toward famine and political collapse. Sri Lanka's government fell. Pakistan's economy buckled. These weren't unrelated events. They were downstream effects of an energy war happening thousands of miles away. Energy insecurity doesn't stay in the energy sector. It bleeds into everything. So where does this go? There are three plausible futures, and only one of them is comfortable. In the first, the global energy system splits into rival blocks, a Western grid powered by renewables and American gas, an Eastern bloc anchored by Russian and Chinese fossil fuels. Energy trade becomes geopolitically curated, slower, more expensive, more volatile. This is the most likely near-term outcome. In the second, clean energy costs fall so fast, and they are falling fast, that fossil fuel dependency becomes economically irrational within 15 years. Countries that moved early own the patents, the supply chains, the jobs. The petrostates face a reckoning they never prepared for. This is possible, but it requires political will that has historically arrived too late. In the third, competition for critical minerals becomes the new geopolitical flashpoint. Not hot wars necessarily, but proxy conflicts, sanctions, economic coercion, and strategic alliances reshuffled around who controls the mines. Sound familiar? It should. It's the oil story again. Different resource, same dynamics. Here's the thing that should keep you up at night. We talk about the energy transition as if it's a clean break. Old world to new world. Fossil fuels to renewables. Problem solved. But transitions don't work that way. The old infrastructure doesn't disappear overnight. The old power structures fight back, and the new technology creates new dependencies, just with different countries, different minerals, different choke points. We aren't escaping the energy wars. We're rebooting them. The question is the same as it's always been. Who controls the resource that the modern world cannot function without? The answer used to be simple. It was oil. It was a handful of countries and a barrel price. Now the answer is scattered across solar panels, battery chemistry, undersea cables, and rare earth mines on 4 continents. More complex, more unstable, more interconnected, and somehow, still, just as dangerous.